Mortons, and it's Wednesday, July 31st, 2024. Welcome to the Math Map Book Club, where Kirsty, Gilpin, and I discuss lessons each week from our math curriculum for families with students enrolled in classical conversations communities. Our club is preparing for our first semester with our students by working on a lesson each week. We hope to highlight strategies for leading our children through the math map. Kirsty, what do you have for us today?
Well, we're really excited that we are jumping in with our new series, and we're going to be using the in-community outline that Leigh designed last summer to go through each of our lessons. We're going to do this for all 30 lessons. So sitting through this book club is going to be an example, not a model and not the same as, but just an example of what our tutors are doing in community with their Challenge A students this year, and then our pilot communities. We have some pilot communities piloting monomials in B and 1. So this is the outline that everybody is following to keep us all doing something that's similar each week. So you are all going to be like our Challenge A students and participate as though you were a Challenge A student. You should have a copy of the math map. Ideally, you will have, if you were in community this year, you would have the complex. So hopefully you have the complex to join us. If you do, you'll be able to see all of the pages at home. If not, you'll be able to see them on the screen. If you are in a different domain, that's okay too. You can have your naturals pages and your fractions pages. And when we get to talking about the lesson pages, you'll be able to participate using those. So we do ask you to bring your copy of the math map each week to our book club so that you can follow along and participate as though you were students. We will have, just so you know, we will have a time for questions at the end. We've purposely tried to leave a few minutes for questions at the end. So feel free to add those into the chat if you don't want to remember them. Or remember them to ask at the end if they're not part of what we're discussing as we go through. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do every week is we are going to talk about the math map and where we are. This is the first thing that a tutor would do as well. And so if you would open up your math map, turn the cover, you will see the math map in front of you. And if we look at this, there's some things that we want to identify. And you can flip back to the cover if you're not sure. So looking at the cover, up in the top right-hand corner, there's a number. And across the top is a title. So this is week 1, ex nihilo, right here. Again, on my cover, looking at this gold bar or whatever color bar you have, that color will match as well as this name. So mine says complex. And so I know that I'm in this column right here. And so looking at where these two intersect, that's why that check mark is there. This page is there for you to take notes. So you can write on this page, take some notes as we go through. That's what your students are going to be encouraged to use this page for as well. Or
why are you wearing pants?
Go
put some shorts on.
All right. If everybody could go ahead and mute themselves when they're not contributing, that would be great. All right, so that's our first thing. So we are at ex nihilo. We are working through the complex. If you're doing a different domain at home, feel free to put a check mark in the domain that you are in, and that's going to help you keep track of where you are as we go through the year. All right. Our warm-up this morning is going to be National Number Knockout. If you are new to National Number Knockout, we are going to give you 3 numbers each week. These were essentially the roll of a dice. They were randomly generated. And you can use addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You can use exponentiation, and you can use roots with any index. Okay, so the index does not need to be one of these numbers. You can use any index, including 0. And you have to use each number exactly once in order to knock off numbers on the board. So you see here 1 through 36. So I'm going to give you an example, and in case this is your first time, 6 plus 4 plus 3 is 13. And so 13 would be knocked off the board. So what we're going to do is you can feel free to speak or put yours in the chat. We're going to do this for 2 minutes exactly. And when that timer goes on, we're going to move on. All right. Let me turn off my arrow here.
Oh, 1.
So if you're going to tell us one, go ahead and say your whole
the whole equation, please.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so it's 6 to the power of 0 times 4 to the power of 0 plus 3 to the power of 0.
Is how much?
Is how much?
1.
Okay, so you were multiplying all of those, right? So 6 to the power of 0 is 1 times 4 to the power of 0 is 1. So that's still 1. And then I think you wanted to multiply it by 3 to the power of 0, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Which is 1.
Good. How about 6 times 4 is 24 plus 3 is 27. And then 6 times 4 minus 3 is 21.
4 times 3 is 12 plus 6 is 18.
6 squared times 6 squared times 4 to the power of 0 times 3 to the power of 0 is 36.
6 times 4 times 3 to the 0 is 24.
4 times 3 times 6 to the power of 0 is 12.
6 plus 3 minus 4 equals 5.
6 minus 4 is 2 times 3 is 6.
4 times 3 is 12 minus 6 is 6. Oh, someone just did it. Sorry.
6 times 3. Oh, 6 times 3 plus 4 is 22.
4 squared is 16 plus 3 squared is 25 plus 6 is 31.
4 times 3 is...
All right, their time's up. So okay. Good job. We'll get to do it again next week. All right. So now we're going to spend 10 minutes and we're going to talk about the elements on our cover. So everybody go ahead and turn to your cover, whatever color you have. Look at your cover. We're going to talk about our artwork and we're going to look at our quotation and our reflection. So let's start with our artwork and let's emphasize this week, what are some things in that picture that maybe make you think of math?
The magic square on the wall above the angel.
The look on the angel's face.
The scales and the sand timer.
The solid polyhedron, whatever that thing is in at the bottom of the ladder.
It looks like the angel is holding a compass to make a circle.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Okay, good.
The ball, the circle.
Like a sphere?
Yeah.
What does that make you think of math?
It makes me think of geometry.
Mm.
And pi.
There's different shapes that make you think of geometry, right?
Yeah, it makes me think of pi.
Oh.
I see a bell that might represent sound waves, a sand timer that would represent time.
I'm watching the book club.
Measurement.
They have a book club going on right now. Today.
Lots of different tools for measuring.
At 1 Eastern.
I know it's a little bit hard to see, but the numbers in the window underneath the bell.
You can unmute it and you can say the sphere makes you think of.
She's doing it as if a director is leading it.
Shapes in general, and the it's coming off the sun.
The sphere makes me think of pi.
It looks like is a sex.
that diamond shape that looks like a stone has all the different angles on it. You can find your angles in math there.
The two colors being black and white, like being binomial.
Oh, I like that.
I see the angel frustrated. That's how I look when I do math.
I like the separation of the firmament from the waters in the background. So you got division going on.
I see a curved line above the word melancholia.
And that makes me think of a rainbow, which makes me think of the beginning of time.
I see a point in the horizon under the rainbow, I assume is the sun.
And rays going up.
I see carpenter tools and stonemason tools, which make me think of geometry because they have to use that a lot when building.
The angles and the shapes and on the wall.
The ladder makes me think, you know, that we keep growing and learning more and traveling upward.
See the three-dimensional shape of the slab of whatever that they're gonna carve into it.
And we can't see what's at the top of that ladder.
Oh.
The wings on the angel that could represent flight and all the math that goes into the whole process of flying.
And then you've got the parallel lines in the ladder, and the ladder's at an inclined angle against a wall.
I think somebody already mentioned the scales, but are we weighing justice or what are we weighing?
Perpendicular lines on the ladder as well.
The angel's belt has intersecting lines on it.
I look at the granite too, and you can almost see maybe a reflection of the angel, so reflection.
Good.
The ladder has multiple perspectives.
The ladder also.
I love the fact that somebody said that ladder has perpendicular lines. Do they look perpendicular in this image? But we know that they're perpendicular, right? Who would want to get on a ladder rung that wasn't perpendicular to the sides? That would be a little alarming, right? So it's a great example of how we can see an image, but what we understand may be different. And as we go through the dimensions, we're going to see that that's one of the things we struggle with as we try to capture our 3D-ness into some kind of 2D image. I'm just going to pivot what you're looking at a little bit, and I'm going to ask you now, just for the next minute and a half, so that we have a little bit of time to read our quotation and our reflection. Somebody already talked about the rainbow reminding them of the beginning. Ex nihilo means out of nothing, and we think of ex nihilo as being a way that we describe creation, that God created from nothing. So what else in this image, what might make you think of creation or creation from nothing? Why would we have chosen this picture to match this lesson?
Sculpting tools. Starting in Genesis, when it talks about things were without form and void, and that the rock art piece of granite could be seen that way.
The sphere could represent Earth.
I think the star in the background could represent the creation of light, which was one of the things that were first created.
The sphere too, it's so perfectly round, it couldn't just have happened to be, it had to be created intentionally.
I was going to mention that the nails down by the foot of the angel could represent pegs, but since we're on this, it could represent Jesus being on the cross, going back to before he was even crucified, being with God.
And during the medieval period, didn't bells represent boundaries and protection or summoning? And that's sitting above is that a Franklin square?
It's or a magic square. Yeah, I think we may be referring to the same thing.
And that bell would represent time as well.
Great.
Next.
Well, good job, everybody.
The
So
word-
I'm going to just pick somebody from who I can see on my screen. Kristen, can you read our quotation for us by E.T. Whitaker?
Sure thing.
Oh, which Kristen?
Oh, sorry. How about Kristen? Is it Bigalki? Is that how you say your last name?
Yes.
How about you read the quotation, and Kristen DeSantis, if you would read our reflection.
Okay. There is no ground for supposing that matter and energy existed before the Big Bang and were suddenly galvanized into action. For what could distinguish that moment from all other moments in eternity? It is simpler to postulate creation ex nihilo, divine will constituting nature from nothingness. E.T. Whitaker.
And our reflection.
If you didn't know, E.T. Whitaker was a mathematician. Knowing that he was a mathematician, does that give added weight to his words?
Yes, because he's speaking from testimony or authority.
So do you think that us studying math might help us to reach a similar conclusion? And is that a reason why we should study math, to be convinced?
Yes, because God authored math, and so we need to see God in the math.
We do. Excellent. All right. Other Kristen.
This reflection's from Lakota Chief Yellowlark. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things that you have made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may understand the things you have taught your people, the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock.
So do we know if Lakota Chief Yellowlark was a Christian?
I think so.
We don't know, right? We don't know. But are his words true? So even if it's not a Christian that wrote it, can we still recognize the truth that's in it? That God has authored and hidden truth in every leaf and every rock? And can we still pray and ask God to let us walk in his beauty?
Yes.
Yeah. So I love it when I've heard people say that all truth is God's truth. And sometimes we are tempted to discount truth if it comes from a source that we're not comfortable with. And that's a good thing, that we need to be discerning and make sure that it really is truth if it's not a source that we're familiar with. But when we know that it is true, we can appreciate the truth, even if we don't necessarily always appreciate the source, right? So I love that quote, that reflection myself, and I definitely hope that God is going to help me to walk in beauty today. All right. Okay, well, good job, everybody. We are going to go ahead now and turn your page to the I squared page. So if you look down at the bottom of the page where the page numbers are, you're going to look for the number that has an I with a 2 next to it, and then or as a superscript. And then at the top of the page, the title of the page is invention. So go ahead and get to that page if you have that. If you're working in a different domain this week, you can follow along with the image that's on the screen. And when we
excuse me, can you please explain to us what you're meaning when you're calling something a domain?
Sure. So the domain, so if you look on your cover, again, right in this corner here, this where it says complex, what that means is those are the kinds of numbers that we're going to be using in this booklet, or actually all year in this domain. So all of the gold booklets that say complex are going to emphasize calculations with complex numbers. Now that includes their subsets. So it really means we're going to be calculating with any number up to and including the complex. if you look at your math map page, right?
Okay, I have no resources that go with this. So basically I'm looking at what you're putting on.
Okay, so we can go in more detail toward the end of the call. But looking at the math map page that we looked at earlier, along the top are the colors, and each of these colors is has a name, and the names are related to number sets. So for example, the red says natural and this green says fractions. What that means is that all of the booklets that go with that particular domain, so that year of naturals or fractions, in naturals, it's designed for students who are 6 and up. So the font is bigger, things like that. But it also means that the domain of the numbers we're calculating with are the natural numbers. So we're only going to calculate with natural numbers. And in fact, we're only going to calculate up to 99. So from 0 to 99. In the fractions domain, that year, we're going to be looking at things that are sort of designed for students who are 9 or older. And the emphasis of our calculations is going to be rational numbers that are in the form of fractions. So all of the pages are going to be aligned so that whichever domain you are working in, you are going to be working on similar problems. They're going to be very, very similar, but designed for a different age student using a different set of numbers. So we can answer more questions about that toward the end of the call. But that's what we mean. So the printed version that we have right now is the gold, the complex domain. There are the naturals, the digits, and the fractions available for download and printing from CC Connected through the Math Map Companion. So if you're using one of those other domains other than the printed one, you won't have these 2 pages that we're going to be talking about, but you can see them on the screen. So as we look at our invention page, there's a lot of math looking things on here, but our goal isn't necessarily to understand the math that's on here, but to practice our skill of invention. All right, so what we're going to do every week when we look at this page is we're going to practice our skill of invention, and the things that we're going to do to help us do that is to use the common topics. So each week we're going to be looking at the common topics as we look at the invention page. So today, let's just talk about definition. Okay, so we're not going to look at all 5 questions. We don't have time, but let's look on here, and I would like everybody to pick out and either say it out loud or put it in the chat log. Pick out one word that you would like to know the definition of, or that you think you know the definition of.
0.
Coordinate.
Irrational number.
Did somebody say Zeroth, the one with the TH?
Okay, good.
Principal root.
Percent.
Complex number.
Unity.
Numeracy.
Requires imagination.
Singular space.
Great. So we've just gone through and we've found some things that we would like to have defined or that we feel like we could define. So what are some resources that we could use to define some of those terms? Who has some ideas? Who's maybe looked at the math map before and has some ideas about where we could find some definitions?
Glossary.
So we have the glossary, right? So through the companion in CC Connected, we could look in the glossary. Where else could we come up with some definitions?
The chart.
Flashcards.
The charts, the flashcards. How about this page that we're looking at?
Yes.
Right? The page that we're looking at could help us define some terms, right? So I heard somebody say unity. Is the definition of unity on this page?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. right? So what is the
So-
definition of unity?
A union of many items into oneness.
Does that make sense? Does anybody want to talk about that?
So it's opposite of unit. I would say that unity is a lot of something, but then a unit, it's a singularity of that.
Oh, I like that. That's a really great comparison, right?
Instead of the word union, the inclusion
It makes me think of the
joining
Trinity.
of many items into oneness,
It makes
I
me
also,
think of Trinity.
like the church.
yeah, church.
Is there a way to use a pointer on the page you've displayed so that I can see where unity appears on that page? Because it's a pretty busy page.
Sure. So this is where we're looking at unity right now. Right in the middle. Great.
And so I have a question.
Yeah.
When we're looking at this page in this first booklet, are we focusing on a specific section of this chart, or do we look at the whole page as a whole? Because it seems very overwhelming.
It does feel overwhelming. I agree.
To look
There's
at
a
all of
lot.
it as a whole. And
There's
I
a
noticed
lot.
that there's a bold section here. So are we supposed to, like, this bold section is telling us we're in 0D, which is the booklet that we're in, the domain that we're in. I'm sorry, not the domain, the dimension that we're in.
Yep.
Does that indicate in any way that we should be focusing on that top section that talks about 0D?
So here with these pages, the page that we're talking about now and the page that we're going to talk about next, we're going to see that there's a lot of ideas that are brought together. Now, sometimes they're from this lesson, and sometimes they may be from lessons throughout the math map, but that Leigh has brought together to create a reference where similar ideas may be found throughout the math map. But our goal when we look at this page is not to understand the math. It may become a reference, right? And over many years, we're going to start to notice different things on this page, and we're going to see what a great math reference it is. But our primary goal is to practice our skills of invention. So depending on your student, or if you're a tutor, depending on the students that you happen to have in your community, right? If looking at the whole page to come up with things to define is overwhelming, you can certainly look at just a smaller portion, right? But there's no right way. Other than saying our goal is to use this to model common topic questions. Right? So this week we talk about definition.
Okay. What I'm noticing as you have been going through this is you're setting timers for specific sections. So I'm assuming that might be a helpful way to limit ourselves to one. You limited us to one common topic, and then you're limiting us to with time.
Yes. That is, we do have some recommended times. I didn't put a timer on these pages because these pages is maybe a little bit easier to kind of corral everybody in. But we do have some limitations of time, which is why I'm actually going to move us from this page to our next page.
May I just ask a brief question?
Yep.
I'm just wondering, can we approach this page the way we would approach Chart A in Essentials? And at first, it's completely overwhelming, but as we progress, we become more and more familiar. Is that what's happening? Is that what's going to happen with this?
Yeah, and again, these pages. So the charts, and we're going to talk about the charts in a minute. The charts present your grammar that is going to be the capstone goal by the time you finish, right? So by the time you get through transcendentals, our goal is that you are familiar with the grammar that's in the charts. What Leigh did for these pages is she pulled some things from those charts into a different arrangement to help you see where some things, right? We may talk about addition in different units, right? But we can also look at where we looked at it all the same, right? So we're going to see how on these pages we're bringing together ideas from different lessons. But the goal, so they will be a good reference, a good math reference as you continue on, right? And you become more familiar. You're right. Over the course of several years, you're going to go, oh, now I see. I've seen all of these lessons. So now I see where this information is coming from, and it's going to help me to make different connections. But especially the first time through, we're really not looking at the content as much as we are how can we use those common topics. So what could I define? What could I compare? Right. So our first couple of weeks, those may be our most familiar questions to look at. Whereas as we get on in the year, we may start to think about relationship and comparison questions, and we may start to think about authority questions. And we may go, oh, wait, I remember that was from lesson 10, and now I'm seeing it in lesson 20, and I'm starting to make some connections. So that'll happen over the course of the year. But this first week, we're really emphasizing when we talk about invention, we're using our common topics and what are some common topic questions that we could ask.
Kirsty, I know that the focus is complex here, but for me, I'm going to start this with my youngers this year, I'm looking at this invention page, and my one question is, when we do see the rollout of other domains to purchase, will these invention pages be adapted, or they all look the same? I know the charts look the same, but will the invention ones look the same in, say, like the digits domain?
I think that the current plan is that they will be the same. I don't know if Leigh wants to address that, but the plan is that they will look the same. Again, so that we're always pointing our students ahead. So you might, with your younger students, right, you're not going to maybe ask the same definition and comparison questions that you might ask of a Challenge 3 student, but you could still ask them, right? Let's compare how many digits are there in each of these numbers, right? So you are going to be able to tailor your common topic questions to the domain of the student that you're working with.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right, we're not going to.
I'm sorry. I want to ask again. Just want to make sure I understood right. So invention page look the same means exact the same as the form, the chart. So every year we'll repeat the same.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this page because we do need to, right? We've got more that we need to get to. So I want to point out that this is our Memoria page, Memoria and arrangement. So our goal on this page is to look for things that we can memorize, right? We can use our skills that are preparing us for memorization. So we can think of naming and attending and expressing and storytelling and memorizing. We can use those skills to help us memorize. And we also want to be able to look at and say, well, what is the arrangement, right? So where my flashcards are going to help me to memorize things discreetly and out of context, this page is going to help take some of that memoria and put it into context.
Mm-hmm.
So we may want to, especially in our Challenge A class, right, talk about, right, how are those columns arranged? What do all of those things in each column, right? As I look down a column, all those things that are in the same column, what do they have in common?
They're from the same dimension.
They are from the same dimension. So if I look at this column, everything is 2D. If I look at the row, like let's say I look at this row, what does everything in that row have in common?
It's the allowable variables.
It's the variables that I'm using in that in each of those dimensions, right? So if I find a match, so let's look at the linear measures that are in 3D. What linear measures are there in 3D?
Length, width, and height.
Length, width, and height. How about the linear measures that are in 0D?
There's none.
There's none, right? So let's look at this, and if you were going to pick one row to memorize, what do you think might be the first row you would like to memorize?
Number of axes and coordinate.
Okay, why did you pick that one?
Because it's the easiest one And
Why is it easy?
Because it's in order.
It's in order, right? So that's great. So those are the kinds of things we want to help our students look at when we look at this page, right? And okay, where do we want to start? Do we have to always start in order and go down? Or can we find something that looks familiar and ordered and go from there? So perfect. So that's what we're going to use our Memoria page and our arrangement page for each week, is to help our students strategize how they can use arrangements and strategize what is worth memorizing in context as they progress. And again, this is another resource that's going to be the same each year. So the goal is not to memorize everything on every page every week in 1 year, but over the course of time, this is the Memoria that we're trying to build with our students.
I have a question on this page.
Sure.
So when we start in the math map, we start with the 0 dimension, but on this page, you're showing a negative 1D. So is there a negative 1D? And if so, is it presented somewhere within the math map that it's presented on this chart?
So the answer is, isn't that a curious question? And for those who want to go 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, can I keep going? Here's a thought that you can have, and you can decide and research and figure out more than what you're familiar with. There's questions here after 4 where we talk about ND, and there's things that are less than 0 where we talk about those dimensions. In order to just say, I wonder if the pattern continues. See, math doesn't always have an answer. And that's the thing that's going to throw folks.
Yeah, this is really the only place, and this lesson is really the only place where you're going to see that negative 1 and that negative 1D. And it's just there to think about, well, kind of if 0D is our nothingness, but that's where things are starting to be created. Is there something that came before? Right. And so that's put there to help you think. All right. As the last portion of this middle piece of our class together, as our community time together, we're going to take a look at the charts. So again, if you have the printed curriculum, you can open up your booklet to the middle and find those blue pages that are your charts. There are 4 each week. These are blue because they are representative of the Transcendentals level. They are not there for you to digest and understand and master in 1 year, but to be a resource and an encouragement of where we're going. So as we look at these, one of the best things that we're going to be able to do with our students is help them to start asking the question of what's familiar and what's unfamiliar. And the learning is going to happen when we start to connect the unfamiliar with the familiar. So for this week, I just want to ask everybody to choose one thing that is familiar. And again, you can either just say that or you can put that in the chat log.
I spy the 5 common topics on the right-hand page. The definition, the comparison, relationship, testimony, and circumstance.
I see truth, beauty, and goodness from the rhetoric trivium table that we use with debate.
Great.
The top
after
one,
practicum.
Yeah.
After practicum, I'm familiar with ex nihilo and 0D.
Excellent.
on page 1, the top 1/4 of the page is familiar to me because it's on the I² page.
Very good.
After the last few book clubs, the quadrivium from the second chart page is becoming familiar.
Great.
The properties of identity for addition and multiplication.
Good.
That's it. That's all the math for that lesson. So let's go on to the next page, Dr. Gilpin.
I just want to point out, if there was anybody sitting there thinking, I'm not sure that there's anything here that's familiar, What language is this written in?
English.
English, right? And I think for probably most of us that are on the call, English is hopefully familiar to you, right? So the letters are familiar to us. We know how to read it. These numbers, even if we don't understand all the things that we're saying about them, right? We probably are familiar with 0 and 1. So when we talk about these things being familiar, I really want to encourage you that it is okay for your students to be incredibly granular. And if it's just saying, I know this word, that's okay, because the goal is to look closely and find something that we can build on. All right. So normally, and in the future weeks, what we will do is we will have a brief time where if you have questions from the previous week, you can ask those. And that's what your students would do next is if they had questions from the previous week, they will have time to do that. The next thing they will do is that they will look at the page tops from their lesson. Ex Nihilo is a little bit different because we want to be introducing all parts of the pages to students and to you. And so we're just going to look at pages 1 and 2, and I have them here, and I have the page tops. And again, Ex Nihilo is a little bit different. Babs, who is one of our amazing, Babs and Shauna are our amazing curriculum assistants. Babs is the first person I heard say, well, just remember, this is like your teacher's guide. So the Ex Nihilo for a parent, this is going to give you the information you need to understand how the booklets are laid out. So notice on page 1, what are we talking about?
The cover.
The cover, right? And so it gives us some information about the booklet cover and how you could use that. On page 2, right, here's something we did not talk about in community because this is something we would do at home, is a contribution to the conversation. And so that's where we have had several people contribute towards these essays that connect the art to the quotation and the reflection to the lesson. So if you're not sure what that discussion might look like at home, or you want some ideas from somebody else, that's what that contribution to the conversation is for. Are there any questions on that? So if you're looking in your booklet, we're open to, sorry about this, we're open to pages 1 and 2 in your booklet. And if you are in a different domain, these pages are still going to be the same. Okay, so you're still going to have the same information in every domain about what these different pages are. And if we were to continue on, right, and this is what I would encourage all of you to do this week, is to read through this, and those page tops are going to tell you about all the different parts of the curriculum.
Kirsty, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
So you'd mentioned that week 1 is different in class because we are doing the Ex Nihilo book. Is the idea that we would do all of the tops with the student in class, or
no? I would
what does that look like?
I would just look at those first couple of pages with them. And again, the idea is to introduce to them what's on these pages so that when they go home, they can say, hey, Mom, if you haven't read this yet, you and I need to sit down and read this booklet together. And I know, right, that the page tops, if I'm curious about something, like I want to know about the careful calculations, well, if on page 8, it's going to tell me about the careful calculations. Okay. So.
I have a question about the contribution to the conversation. Is that something that the directors will be doing in class with the students, or is that something that is meant to be done at home with the parent?
So it is there, a director may have read that and may use that to give them some questions in class, but it is not to be read in class. It is really intended to be a resource for the tutor to help them if they're stuck on some questions or some ideas to take in, and then for parents to use at home. So you may want to read that at home. Or again,
Kirsty, make the connection. It's a lot of people will look at the covers and they won't know what to say about them. So the contribution helps you have ideas of what to say about them when you're in front of the children.
Okay,
that's what it's there for.
One more question about that. So I'm a new Challenge A director. So my understanding is that
So do the parents need to like introduce this at home before they come to community, or as a director?
As a director, you will go through this. So in week 1, they're going to come in with their booklets. Hopefully parents have read through this before, but if they haven't, that's okay, because week 1, you're going to introduce this in class, go home, and then the students are going to work through it. So lesson 2 next week, we're going to introduce it, and then you're going to go home and work on it.
Okay.
Think of it like this. What's your first assignment, student? To read the instruction manual, because nobody wants to read instruction manuals anymore. And we're becoming an illiterate society, and we need to remind our children the written word is a really good communication tool. And math is very difficult because the written math is so compact with meaning that if you can't take the time to read through in English, it's going to be really hard to be disciplined to read through the math also. So it's just an instruction booklet, and you can do as much of it as you want that first week. So the tutor is showing the child in a class, these are all the parts that you can go home and study and read and study and use it to compare to your other parts of the curriculum so you can begin to understand how it's put together. But don't worry about doing math or being right. And so like when Kirsty was leading you all through the invention pages, the point is just to say, wow, this is dense, but I can read it. I might be able to read one word on that, but I can find something I can do because I won't say can't or won't anymore. Right? So we're trying to set up the attitude of how you approach mathematics throughout the curriculum also, not just run through calculations and problems.
So just to clarify, this entire first book, Ex Nihilo, is the instruction booklet. Next week, it will look very different because it will have work for children to do. They will write, they will talk, they will discuss, they will use charts, they will use all the things actually doing work. Whereas this week, we're really just kind of reading our guide together, like we read our guide in Challenge A as parents and students before week 1.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you. That's perfect.
There's also, though, correct me if I'm wrong, but the middle section in
I'm
booklet
just about to
1
get
does
there.
have
So,
something to engage with.
Yep, hold that thought, because
Okay.
we're just about to do that. So the first thing we're going to do with our students is we're going to introduce them to what's on the top of the pages, which is really our instruction manual. This is the parts of our curriculum. Then we can look at the middle. And remember, this week is Ex Nihilo. This is the week that we're introducing 0D. And we're not going to go deep into the number and numeracy piece of 0D, but the big ideas about 0D, right? The just thinking through. So the middle section here, which you may or may not get to this year, but over the course of several years, hopefully you're going to see your students starting to think deeper and deeper. And we're going to go through, and there's questions on here that are going to help us to think through, what do we know about 0D? What's different between a point and a dot, right? Why is 0 a powerful number, right? And so the middle sections of these pages, if we had time, right, we could discuss some of these questions. We're running out of time today, so I'm going to go quickly, right? But in community, as a tutor, I could have asked you, right, how are points and the dots that represent them different? And at home, right, those are some things that you can work on. And then the last piece that I'm going to want my students to notice as they're looking at those 2 pages is the bottom. And our first year through the math map, you may not find that you are working towards your lesson 29 every week. But as we become more familiar with the curriculum and we have more practice with the curriculum, finding things that we want to put in our lesson 29 booklet is going to just become a part of every day. That our goal is that people are going to start to see either math or God in creation, right, in the world around us. And they're going to start to go, oh, look at that really cool pattern. Or, wow, Mom, look at those parallel pine trees outside. And as we notice those things, we're going to collect those ideas. So it might be something that we write. It might be a picture that we take. It might be something that our students draw. And we're going to start collecting those. And then in lesson 29, the students are going to be given a blank book and asked to fill that with those things that they've seen over the course of the year. So at the bottom of these pages, pages 1 through 16, there are examples of things that a student may choose to put in their lesson 29 booklet. So right now that may feel like I don't know what those kinds of things are, but over the course of time, students start to notice and they go, oh, I want to keep that for my lesson 29 booklet. And these examples are just here to get that process started.
Christy, if we could go back for just a minute, the lesson 29 booklet makes a lot of sense to me. Where I'm getting stuck just for week 1 is some of the middle section, which I know you're saying we might not have time to get to it. However, I have some kids that I had in Essentials a couple years ago. I know they're math brains. I know how curious and gung-ho they are, and they're going to have questions. And there's some things there that I don't understand, and I've highlighted because I've looked for them in the companion, and they don't have explanations. So those are the kinds of things that I'm worried about, because I want to be supporting these kids, and I know that not all of them have math-minded parents either.
Sure. So some of the kind of answers to these questions are in the solutions pages. But also remember, if you're a Challenge A director, you have access to math help desk hours with me. So if you come across something and you're like, I really want more detail, or I want to walk through that, that would be a great time to sign up for one of those help desk sessions and come and say, hey, can you walk through this with me? If you're a parent, you can give those questions to your Challenge A director and they can come and bring those. Is there a question you have now that we could answer for you?
I'm looking at page 8 in the middle section, and I did take geometry and algebra, but I don't know that I could explain why the slope of a vertical line is infinite and why the asymptote is at x equals 2. Those don't have explanations in the companion.
Sure. So eventually they will. So I thank everybody for being patient as we build the content there. I'm just looking real quick to see what you would have. Yeah, there really isn't anything for those two in the answer key. So we'll talk about that in greater detail. So you could go and look in lesson 9. We're going to talk more about slope. And so if you wanted to look in lesson 9 at the charts there, you may find some more answers. But we're trying to point out there that the idea is, we know arithmetically we don't divide by 0, but when we see that expression 1 over 0, when we're talking about slope, it's telling us something about the line, that line is just vertical. So we can think about its slope being infinite, right? It's just going straight up. There is no slant to it. It's just going straight up. And so historically that was called infinite slope. And that's all we're really putting there. And then the asymptote, again, is related to that, and that you would find in lesson 11. And right, again, x can't be 2 because my denominator can't be 0. But as I get close to that, what's happening to the slope of my line? Well, my line would become infinite, and it never really does, but that's why we put that asymptote there to say that's what I'm approaching. So that's a great example of where you may say to your students, like, hey, that's here because next year we're going to be able to answer that question. But let's make sure we're looking for that as we work through this year. Let's see if we can look for the answer to that as we work through this year.
And I love the advice that was to highlight that I've seen earlier. It says to highlight the instructions, and
the instructions on that page say to discuss the question for each circumstance and division. So we just kind of discuss it. We don't have to have all the answers. So I love that. We just get to discuss, ooh, this is the case. What? Let's discuss what we see.
That's great.
Well, if I can add maybe a little bit to that question of the geometry, if we define slope as the rise over run, and we are only rising and never running, it's infinitely going up.
That's a great way to put that. All right, so we're going to finish each week by looking at our resource reminders. And so every week, and we're going to do this together this week, I'm going to ask you the question in black, just like a responsive reading at church, and you are going to read what's in orange. All right, so we're going to practice this together. So what are the solutions for?
To check
or work
backward.
Excellent. So I'm just going to remind all of you that the solutions, right, we can use them to work backwards, that or copy work, that using the solutions as part of how we learn, not just to see if we got something right. So I really want us to all be encouraged that those solutions are useful for more than just seeing if we got something right. All right, what is the inside back cover for?
To extend the conversation, fill the lesson 29 booklet.
29 booklet.
Excellent. What is the back cover for?
To play games.
What is the careful calculations page for?
As a review or a test.
What are the flashcards for?
So I can read math.
All right, I'm going to pause here because I just want to address the fact that we have sold out of the flashcards again. And I know how many people are frustrated with the fact that we keep selling out of the flashcards. We've just been overwhelmed with the reception and so grateful that you guys are excited about this. And so in the meantime, right, while you're waiting for this beautiful resource, I want to encourage all of us to kind of go back and be classicalists. And maybe grab some index cards and make some flashcards yourself. So there are a couple of ways that you could do this. One, you could go ahead and as you're working through with your students, say, hey, what are some things on this page that you just don't know or you didn't know until it was defined on this page, right? So I might just do it that way. And so I'm building with my student, I'm kind of building a grammar and I'm finding those things that were unfamiliar and making a flashcard. Alternatively, if you look in the companion and you go to the glossary, I think it's been updated this morning. The first 3 pages are pages that have all kinds of notations and abbreviations. And so there may actually be even more notations and abbreviations there than you would find in the flashcards. So that is another great resource for going and finding some notations and making your own flashcards that you can use at home while you're waiting for the Classical Conversations flashcards to arrive. All right.
Do we happen to know when they'll be back in stock?
I have heard that they're trying to get them as quickly as possible, but I've heard early September. So it may be sooner, but we can't make any promises. All right. So what is the Math Map Companion for?
So my parents can answer my question.
And what are the lesson pages for?
Practice math concepts.
Excellent. Well done, everybody. You have finished your first week as students here with us at our book club. And I don't know, my slides do not want to progress for some reason. I just realized because I forgot to do the arrows. There we go. Just a reminder that we do have lots of ways that you can get support. There's the companion, the forums, there's your own community and your tutors. There is email there, and we will continue to meet at 1 p.m. The archive is available through leebortons.com, and you'll see there we now are in our 4th iteration of the book club. So depending on what you're looking for, those are some different places that you can go and look as you work through the book club. And then we're going to continue working lesson by lesson. So next week it will be lesson 2, 3, 4, and so on. All right. Does anybody have any last minute questions? We did use up all of our time. We answered a lot of questions in as we went through.
How long does it take to get the posted, this video, for example?
It's usually within a week. I know Emma works on getting that edited and uploaded as soon as possible. So if you subscribe to leigbortons.com, you will get a notification that it has been uploaded, and you'll know as soon as it is.
Okay.
Kirsty, I have a quick question.
If they could speed that up at all, because some of us start next week and this our first day of community. So if it's a week late, it's hard to use this information.
So there's 2 years of videos you can watch, and just go watch any of them, and they all will help you with your first week.
If you're a tutor, remember that you have access to tutor-specific equipping, and that tutor-specific equipping is going to go through this almost exactly the same way I did, just without all the conversation. So it's going to be a lot quicker. So if you're a tutor, I would really encourage you to go to your weekly equipping that's in the companion, and you're going to find a lot of the same information without all the conversation. The tops of the pages are worked through in the companion. Everybody has access to those, so you can click on a page top and see a little video that is working those through. So like I said, I know that Emma is going to work on getting these uploaded as soon as she can, be as timely as she can with that. But if for the tutors, that equipping is already available to you. Amy, I did want to honor that you had your hand raised. Did your question?
Yeah, I have just a quick question for both you and Leigh. I have twin 9-year-olds who will be entering essentials for the first time this year. And I know that we have the digits, the naturals, and the fractions. My question would be, would it be advisable to start them this year with digits, do naturals next year, and then fractions the following, and then they'll be in complex in A?
So what we are recommending for those that are willing to jump in early and use our beta materials, we are recommending that everybody, if you look, I don't have the slide here, and I apologize for that. But I know that if you look in the forums or you email the mathmap@cc.com, they can make sure that you can see the image. We have recommended that you find your child's age and start to the left. So 9-year-olds, we would recommend that you start with fractions here. Now, if you find that the fractions are overwhelming, go back and you can pick up the naturals. But we would recommend that you start this year with whatever's your age or to the left. And then next year, you would be sort of on track age-wise to move into the next level and eventually be well set for Challenge A.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Kirsty,
welcome.
I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, because when I dug into what you guys have on Companion, it is just like a whole set of encyclopedias of material. So I was just really blown away. My question is in part related because I have some families that are somewhat hesitant to feel like they need an online resource every week, like that it could be cumbersome for them. Would you say that it is essential, like you cannot do it without the companion? What would your recommendation be?
Sure, absolutely. So let me go back to early on when Leigh and I sat down and first started talking about what the math curriculum would look like. Leigh's vision was that families would have an all-inclusive resource that was really mobile and user-friendly, because she knows that families are always on the go. And so the booklets were specifically designed to have everything you need to be successful every week. The companion is a beautiful additional resource. It has extra information because we wanted to have a place where you could go and have resources that were curated to go along with the math map. But the booklets were designed to be all that you need to be successful each week. And from our pilot families and our pilot tutors, that was the overwhelming feedback that we got, was we love the companion and it's so helpful, but we don't need it. We're successful with just the booklets. The companion is just extra. So I would
Thank you.
absolutely encourage you that all you need are those booklets. Veronica, I see your hand.
Hi, Christy. Thank you. I'm a new director this year, and I am unfortunately not mathematically minded. And as I've been working through the complex to try to develop lesson plans so that I'm not silent in seminar every week, I'm coming across a lot of things when even I look at the explanations in the companion, they're still not quite registering for me. And so I'm wondering, as a tutor, am I expected to be able to teach concepts like when we go over tops of pages? Because we're in trouble if I am.
So here's the beautiful thing. I remember, so this is another thing that Leigh has always said. She's like, don't bring up things that you don't understand, right? Don't let your students, if you don't know how to diagram a sentence on the fly, don't let your students make up a sentence, right? Plan ahead, bring in the sentence, and then have your notes as to how to diagram it, right? In essentials. So you can go in and be prepared and you guide the conversation. And that's why we have worked through, right? And well, not all of them, right? We're through lesson 15. I think lesson 12 is currently live on CC Connected. But if you go to page 1, right, click onto page 1 in the companion of each booklet, pages 1 through 4, and you look at the top problems, you're going to see you can click on each of those and there's a video. So as a tutor, you can watch that video. I'm going to walk through it and remember that your job is not necessarily to teach that, right, concept, but to help the students, right, to model, well, how do I go through this, right? So what is it that I know? What are my resources? What can I look at? Let's compare here. So that's, you're not trying to teach, but you're trying to help model. And remember that what we're doing this year is we're using our common topics, right? We're learning classically. So we're going to be using a lot of definition and a lot of comparison. What can I compare this to? Is there something here that's complete? Well, how does that help me to do the next one? And how does that help me to do the next one? So you do not have to be a math master in order to successfully lead a seminar.
Okay, so if they're asking me to explain something and I don't know how, is it fair for me to say that'll be a great thing for you and your parents to look at home?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And remember, you as a Challenge A tutor do have access to our math help desk hours. So if a parent comes back and says, we don't get this, you can say, well, let me go and ask, right? And you can come and spend some time with me and we'll work through it. And then you can take that back to your parents.
Okay, thank you.
And Veronica, don't worry about teaching the math. Worry about reading the English that's on the page. The better you get at reading and demonstrating to the children how to read math, all of you will get better at doing everything there is in math, because the number one stumbling block and why you probably feel unconfident about math is nobody taught you how to read it first. They expect you to be able to calculate and solve problems and use definitions when you don't even know what the words mean. So rely on the glossary more, and it's never wrong to say to a student, I don't know the answer to that. Does anybody in the class know? How could we find out? Could we compare it to the problem before? Let's go see if the chart will help us. I wonder if something on the contribution would have been helpful to this. What are my resources? Because our resources are not the right answer. The resources are the body of Christ and the world that the Lord created. And we need to teach our children to go after all of it. And that's what you as a tutor are supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, because I know you can do that, Veronica, because you're a curious person.
I can do at least that. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you, everybody. We've gone over our hour, but hopefully we're helping everybody to feel encouraged. So come back next week. We're going to jump into lesson 2. That's going to look more like a math book than this week did, but we're going to be doing the same thing every week. We're going to be going through the same outline of our time together. So I look forward to examining number notation with you. Have a great week.
Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you so much.
That was a lot.
Bye-bye.